Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The printer choked mid-page and screamed. Liam froze by the door. I jabbed cancel and grabbed the half sheet. The page stung my fingers and tore white edge like a wound. I'm Mara, 32. He lunged for the power strip and missed. The printer spat another inch, then locked. A gray block sat where his signature should be, blank but heavy. Unplug it, his voice scraped low. He reached again and knocked my mug. Coffee slid toward the laptop in a fast line. I pulled the cord and yanked the paper free, heart drilling. The laptop blinked black, then returned. A pop-up asked to locate an embedded object. Liam's jaw flexed and settled. He stared at the torn sheet like it could bite. Show me. I held the page high. He didn't move for a beat. Then he smiled too slow and lifted both hands. The smile dropped before it reached his eyes. My phone buzzed. Broker. I opened the email with my thumb shaking. Subject line read document failed validation. The attachment previewed clean, then fuzzed, barcode melting into noise. Don't open that here. He closed the laptop with his palm. My thumb still touched the glass and caught on the hinge. I pulled back and felt heat rise, anger or fear. Step away. I hated how flat I sounded. He did 3 short steps to the hallway and blocked it. Silence pressed in and made the fan sound like sirens. I reconnected power and hit print again. The queue showed one job named Liam Current. Another job appeared on its own. Its name was just a dot, then 2 dots. The printer whirred without paper. Its tray was full but nothing fed. Liam's hands hovered like he wanted to clap and couldn't. The screen flashed replace object or ignore, then froze. I dragged the dot file to trash. The icon slid back to desktop by itself. My mouth went dry fast. Liam's phone lit on the counter and flashed unknown device paired. He snatched the phone and locked it. I reached for the router and pressed reset. The room clicked as everything died, then slowly woke. The printer stayed dead and angry. Keys. He opened a drawer and came up empty. I kept my hand on the router and watched him look. He didn't look at me once, only at screens. Why does your ID act like software? I hated the shake in that line. He leaned on the island and stared at the torn page. Glitch, he said and blinked too fast. I took a photo of the paper. The image on my phone looked sharper than the real thing. A menu appeared on the photo, open in P.D.F viewer. My lungs tightened. A knock hit the door, 3 hard taps. Our neighbor's voice came muffled and close. Power surge here too. Liam didn't answer. He kept his eyes on my hands like a hawk. I pocketed the page and moved to the door. Liam slid in front with a half step. His shoulder brushed mine, cold through fabric. I lifted my chin and held it. Another buzz from the broker pushed through. New line appeared on the preview banner. Please provide a physical license today or the file is void. The words felt like a countdown. I tried AirDrop to my own tablet. The transfer bar jumped, then stalled at 99%. The file name morphed into Final Trulifinal. Liam swallowed and tapped his wrist once. Last time, I reopened the queue and forced print. The printer made a grinding cough and pulled the page crooked. A thin strip fed out covered in tiny repeating seals. He reached for it and stopped mid-reach. If you print that fully, I disappear. He whispered it like a dare. My thumb hovered over resume, everything loud. I pressed pause and looked at him. His chest moved fast but shallow. Disappear where? My voice came out steady and strange. He tapped the gray block on the torn sheet. Back into this. He didn't blink or I scatter. His finger stayed there like it hurt. I hit resume. The feeder grabbed the strip and tugged hard. His knuckles whitened as he reached. I yanked the main switch. Everything died mid-grind. He stared at the dark box like a cliff. I kept my hand on the breaker. You vanish if it completes. My throat felt raw and stubborn. Give me the page. He held out both palms. I folded the torn piece and slipped it into my pocket. We settle this now, I said, pulse kicking. I opened my camera and switched to document scan. The frame boxed his torso like a form. The app pinged and offered save as PDF. He flinched and stepped sideways. Hold still. I tracked him across the tiles. The rectangle chased him like a leash. He lifted an elbow and the box resized tighter. Unlock my phone. I pressed my device into his hand. He placed a thumb on the sensor and waited. The screen flashed, image detected, try again. He pressed again, slower, denied, third try, denied. He wiped his thumb on his shirt and didn't look at me. Real people unlock it? I lifted mine and opened with a glance. He watched the screen like it was a window. His shoulders sank, but he stayed quiet. I flipped the switch and let power return. The printer rebooted with a cough. I pulled the USB and slid it into my pocket. He mauve. At once too late. My laptop woke and showed the desktop. A new icon shimmered into view, restore me. He reached for the trackpad. I slapped his wrist and dragged the file onto a drive. Stop copying me. His mouth barely moved. Prove you're not just a file. My own voice surprised me. He pointed at the door. We go in person. He lifted the keys from the hook and waited. I heard a shout in the hall, contractors arguing over trip circuits. We passed the lobby gates. I held up the torn slip. If those scanners strip you, I lose you. He stalled in the doorway and glanced at the ceiling sensors. Speaker, I dialed the broker and set the phone down. The ring hit twice, then clicked. Your upload renders as an embedded asset, came through tight and clipped. Meet us and scan it yourself. I kept the phone close. A sigh crackled in the audio. Bring a physical license today or the application collapses. The call ended on a hard tone. We drive now, I said, grabbing my bag. He stood still and scanned the room like exits mattered. Stay away from those gates, I added, voice sharp. We cut through the service stair. He took the steps 2 at a time. I kept behind him and counted landings. At the garage door, he stopped short and touched the frame. M field here, he pulled back his hand. It scrubs metadata if it spikes. He looked at me like that sentence should decide everything. We used the side ramp. I triggered the opener and listened for the chain. We slipped out as the door rattled. Traffic hummed beyond the concrete. He slid into the passenger seat. The dash woke and paired with my phone. A prompt blinked, indexing contacts. A small icon appeared next to his name, a file symbol. I snapped a photo of the screen. He covered the display with his forearm. I swerved and swallowed a curse. The photo saved with a long string of characters. We pulled into a copy center 2 blocks down. One print, I told the clerk, keeping my voice steady. He waved us toward a self-machine without looking up. I plugged in the drive and opened the folder. The license mock-up filled the preview pane. A warning popped, missing font, Liam regular, substitute or cancel. Substitute, I tapped. The preview flipped to outlines. His face turned into wire mesh. The print button brightened and waited for a decision. He moved closer, breath short. If you flatten it, I drop layers. His hand hovered over the cancel key. Mine hovered over print. A heavy chirp sounded near the entrance. The theft gate lit red and pulsed. The clerk glanced up once and then away, pretending peace. Pick, I didn't raise my voice. Stay a person or become data. He stared at the glowing button like it was a ledge. I hit print. The rollers grabbed paper and pulled smooth. His knees bent like he might fold. The first inch slid out blank. The display recalculated and threw another alert. Output device requires checksum. Provide checksum source. The screen waited like a held breath. He dug a chain from his pocket and lifted a tiny tag. Etched numbers caught the light, then settled. He pressed the tag to the scanner pad and held still. The machine beeped once. The inch of paper filled with micro seals marching in rows. The portrait area stayed empty, white and stubborn. He lowered the tag. That's all I own. He let the chain drop against his chest. The machine whirred like it wanted more. I canceled mid-job and grabbed the half page. The clerk watched us and frowned. The gate by the door flickered back to blue. Photo booth, I pointed across the shop. He didn't move, so I walked. He followed with small, uneven steps. I slid coins and started the session. The screen framed his head and counted down. Flash, 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 the result displayed clean. I tapped print. The kiosk paused and showed exporting to PDF. Download code followed and spun in place like a loading wheel. I wrote the code on my wrist. He read it out loud once and flinched. The numbers sounded like a password he had used forever. Next step, I opened my banking app. Remote deposit requires live check scan popped up on its own. A tiny prompt beneath offered try ID proofing. I pointed the camera at him. The app drew face landmarks and asked hold still. It calculated for a long second. Then it showed found layered asset. I saved the result and backed away. He didn't chase me. He just stood there with hands loose and eyes fixed. We have enough to ask questions, I said, breath thin. He lifted the useless print and smoothed the torn edge. The white portrait space stared between us like a dare. The civic scanner chirped the moment we crossed the threshold. A guard lifted his palm and pointed to the intake lane. I kept moving until his stance hardened. Liam slowed behind me and kept his eyes on the floor. Enrollment or verification? The clerk's tone barely rose. I slid the half-print and the booth photos across. She studied the blank portrait space, then tapped the screen twice. Live capture required now, she added without blinking. We followed the arrows to a glass plate and a camera. Hands! The tech nodded at the pad and waited. Liam pressed down with steady pressure. The display returned a flat line and a warning. Try again. The tech wiped the surface with a quick swipe. Liam placed both thumbs and held until the timer ended. The readout flashed no capacitance change and locked the session. The tech pivoted to the camera and started depth capture. Red dots marched over his jaw and then stalled. The unit paused and showed depth mismatch detected. A supervisor drifted closer and watched without speaking. Document booth. The supervisor gestured toward a sealed cabinet and stepped aside. I fed the torn sheet into the slot and breathed shallow. The cabinet lights pulsed while a message crawled across. Retrieving reference from issuer. Liam shifted his weight like his shoes hurt. The cabinet beeped twice and began to recompose the missing area. Pixels gathered where his face should appear. He reached for the cancel key and stopped inches away. I hit the release and snatched the page back. An alarm popped on the cabinet face and then cut. 2 guards leaned but didn't move forward. The supervisor held up one finger. Wait. Private room? He unlocked a door and motioned us inside. The space felt quiet like a storm eye. He pulled an offline reader from a drawer and set it between us. No network, he said, calm and firm. He slid our sheet under a clamp and started a local scan. The reader traced the seals and opened a layer tree. Nodes bloomed and collapsed like a controlled burn. Liam's jaw tightened when one node labeled origin refused to expand. Source key. The supervisor looked at Liam's hands. Liam pulled a small metal token from his pocket and placed it on the pad. The reader recognized it and unlocked 3 more nodes: template, issuer, bundle, snapshot. The top node still refused to open. The reader posted constructed without anchor and waited. The supervisor dragged the window aside and took in a slow breath. There's a path, he murmured, then glanced at me. Provisional status, he continued after a beat. Witness bond from a partner and a compliance pledge. He held my eyes until I nodded once. Liam stared at his token like it might disappear. 2 tests left. He pushed a thin pad onto the desk. Pressure signature on an ink mat, then a wet copy to archive. Liam picked up the pen and hovered over the line without touching it. Write your full name. The supervisor leaned back and watched the pad. Liam lowered the tip and drew quick strokes. The output traced perfect vectors and showed 0 force variation. The pad chimed and turned orange. The screen posted signature lacks dynamic pressure. The supervisor didn't flinch. Wet copy anyway, he said and placed a fresh sheet down. Liam signed again, slower this time. The ink sat on the surface without feathering and looked too clean. The supervisor tilted the sheet and tapped the corner. One more marker, he said, voice steady but tight. He snapped a portable UV bar across the name and waited. Hidden patterns should have bled into the paper. Nothing shifted. He studied the spotless line for 1 more second, then reached for the intercom. I covered the intercom with my palm. The supervisor paused mid-press. Liam's token clicked on the desk once. Give us the bond path, I said, steady but tight. Witness pledge carries liability. The supervisor's gaze weighed me. He slid a slim pad forward and pointed at 2 boxes. Accept or decline pulsed like a heartbeat. I tapped accept and felt my stomach climb. A tiny lancet popped from the pad and waited. Sample marks intent, the supervisor warned without blinking. I pressed my fingertip down and held. A red dot bloomed and sank into the sensor. The pad posted witness key stored and asked for a counter mark. Liam reached for the lancet and stalled. The room felt very small. Prove liveness first, the supervisor added with a small tilt. He placed a fog strip on the table, 3 breaths in sequence. He counted off with 2 fingers. Liam leaned in and exhaled slow. A faint haze traced the panel, then faded fast. The strip demanded another. He breathed again and the haze drew thinner. The strip flashed inconclusive and waited for a third. Again, my voice clipped the air. Liam tried once more. The panel showed unstable pattern and asked for manual review. The supervisor shifted to a coin flip test. Call it midair without touching. He tossed a token straight up. Liam tracked it and whispered tails. The token landed heads and rang once. The supervisor watched Liam's mouth and jaw. No audio latency, he noted under his breath. He brought out a random phrase board. Repeat with exact timing. Lights blinked in uneven bursts. Liam matched the rhythm with clipped syllables. A metronome bar crawled along the screen. The returns aligned, then drifted. The board posted edge compression detected and requested a checksum. Use your tag. The supervisor slid the metal token back. Liam pressed it to the reader and kept it there. The offline unit accepted the ping and opened a fresh pane. Final gate, the supervisor said and set down a blank card. Wet impression on archival stock. He placed a shallow tray beside it and watched our eyes. Liam dipped the pen and hovered. My hands balled into fists. He touched the line and moved with tiny strokes. The ink spread a fraction and stopped clean. The card asked for pressure readback. The gauge responded with a flat line. Mirror test. I grabbed the backup mirror from the drawer. I held it to his lips and waited. A fog bloom appeared, then thinned too neatly. A knock rattled the door. A guard peered in and pointed to his watch. The supervisor raised one finger hold and snapped the deadbolt. He turned the offline unit toward me. Witness imprint bonds him to your claim. A box opened with a blinking cursor. Enter 3 words you will defend. I typed the photo booth code on my wrist. He frowned at my choice and still nodded. The unit hashed it and spit out a short string. Now touch him with the pad. He handed me a small plate wired to nothing. I pressed it to Liam's forearm and felt a faint vibration. The unit listened and displayed a graph. A thin waveform appeared and then split. One line matched my key and stabilized. The other fluttered like a trapped bird. The supervisor leaned in close. That's enough for provisional, he said with care. He printed a receipt and stamped a time window. Next is the exit gate, he warned. It scrubs unanchored layers on contact. He slid 2 passes across the desk and met my gaze. I tucked one pass into my sleeve. Liam pinched the other between 2 fingers. His hand trembled once, then went steady. Stay together through the tunnel. The supervisor unlocked the door and stepped aside. If he drops off the sensors, keep moving. We crossed the room and hit the corridor. A security camera rotated and paused on us. The guard from the hall fell in behind with slow steps. The tunnel glowed with checkpoint arcs. The first gate hummed and scanned our passes. My card chirped green and released me. Liam stepped in and lifted his chin. The arc washed over him and stalled. The screen posted anchoring witness required within 2 meters. I moved closer until our shoulders touched. The arc recalculated and flickered green. The guard grunted and waved us forward. 2 more gates waited like open mouths. At the second his pass dimmed and blinked low, the display asked for phrase recall. I whispered the code into his ear. He repeated it on a steady beat. The gate cleared and dropped its bars. The third gate spit a warning as we approached. Integrity drift detected, rescan recommended. The guard tapped his radio and waited. Push through, I told Liam without looking back. We stepped as one and kept our speed. The gate screamed once and then went quiet. We burst into the main hall and didn't stop. The supervisor's receipt warmed in my pocket like a coal. Liam kept pace beside me and didn't look left. At the exit doors, a final kiosk blinked awake. Upload to register or exit as guest glowed on the screen. Liam's shoulders stiffened like wire. I held up the receipt with shaking fingers. The kiosk scanned the stamp and opened a side lane. The display warned return within 48 hours for permanent anchor. We stepped into daylight and air hit my face. A second receipt printed from a hidden slot. Liam caught it before it fell and folded it twice. 48 hours, I said, voice low and firm. He tucked the slip deep and nodded once. The doors slid shut behind us like a clock. My phone buzzed. The broker requested an in-person check now. Bring him and the provisional slip. Her voice carried that don't argue tone. Liam folded the receipt once more and stared at the curb. We drove straight there without talking. At the entrance, a security wand hovered over our passes. Mine beeped once, then cleared. His chirped twice and threw review required across the display. Inside, I kept moving so he had to keep pace. The broker waited by a kiosk and waved us closer. Live proof or the file dies today. She tapped her screen and opened a capture window. The kiosk asked for a blink pattern. Liam followed the rhythm and held steady. The graph drew lines that almost matched. The system posted compression variance and demanded a fallback. Secondary path, the broker slid a tablet toward me. Partner oath or you both walk. Her jaw flexed while she watched the returns on her monitor. I pressed my palm to the sensor and waited. The tablet asked for a phrase with exact beats. I counted the code under my breath and entered it clean. The tablet accepted and linked to his pass. The kiosk ran a new step, shadow occlusion. A panel extended and swept a narrow bar under his chin. The measurement paused halfway and flagged missing microgeometry. The broker swore under her breath and reset. The tool. One more chance. She aligned the bar again. Liam didn't blink this time. The reading crawled forward, then stalled at 97%. We need the issuer call. Her finger hovered over a red key. This pings the authority and stores whatever returns. Liam's shoulders rose like they were bracing. Ping. I leaned forward so she couldn't dodge. She hit the key and the kiosk opened a tunnel. Waiting dots crawled across until a strict voice filled the speaker. Provide anchor witness and checksum origin. I gave the oath string and pushed the receipt under the camera. The line stayed flat. Origin absent, the voice concluded without emotion. Try the tag. I lifted the small token from his pocket and set it on the pad. The kiosk sniffed it and pulled a tiny file. The portrait box flickered with a grainy outline and stopped. The broker's gaze sharpened. There is a living snapshot hidden in that tag. She slid a stylus across the screen and isolated a segment. We can merge it, but something might collapse. Do it. My throat hurt. Liam looked at the door like a runner measuring distance. The broker tapped merge and killed the network on her side rig. The kiosk stitched for a breath. The outline stabilized and gained edges. A warning flashed, conflict with existing layer order, and asked for a choice. Which one preserves him? My voice shook once, then steadied. Top layer is more recent, the broker answered. Base layer is more durable. Durable? I hit the choice before doubt could bloom. The kiosk wrote in silence and pushed a new checksum toward my oath. My screen flashed, paired, and warmed my palm. The room lights dimmed for a heartbeat. The kiosk froze with a blank square where his face should be. The broker slapped the side panel and yanked a service latch. Don't touch him, I snapped, moving between them. She pulled back and forced a breath. Power cycle without network, she said through her teeth. I killed the kiosk and counted 10, brought it back and watched the boot screen crawl. The face box filled slowly until a non-photo silhouette settled. The broker checked the clock. You have 36 hours now, she said. We shaved your window with that merge. She printed a notice and slid it across. A shadow moved in my peripheral vision. 2 compliance officers entered and scanned the room. Their badges pinged the kiosk and brought up our case. One officer tilted his head at the empty portrait space. Status, his voice carried something practiced. The broker handed him the printout and kept her expression neutral. He skimmed it and leaned toward Liam. Follow for validation? He gestured toward a side corridor and waited. Liam didn't move. He only pressed the tag into my palm like a secret. Partner attends, I said before he could split us. The officer considered me and then nodded once. Stay within an arm's length, he warned with a glance. They led us into a scanner lane that pulsed low. Witness on the right pad. The other officer positioned me and watched the spacing. If separation exceeds threshold, he reverts. The first scan passed and posted partial anchor detected. The second demanded a voice stamp from me on a tight beat. I matched it and felt my mouth go dry. At the third, a thin beam swept our shoulders. The officer checked a handheld and frowned. Dropout on his left side, he muttered, eyes still on the readout. He adjusted Liam's stance by 2 inches, ran the beam again. The dropout shrank but didn't disappear. External interference, he concluded, scanning the ceiling grid. Remove metal, he pointed at the token in my fist. I handed it to him and he placed it in a tray. The beam swept once more and finally cleared with a hard chirp. Provisional anchor advanced, the handheld announced. Return for permanency with original origin. The officer's stare landed on the empty portrait square again and lingered. He released us to the lobby with a curt nod. The broker intercepted and thrust a small envelope into my hand. Take this to the local issuer kiosk, she whispered, not the main one. What's inside? I kept my voice even. A bridge key, she answered. It might trick their archive for one reading. We stepped onto the sidewalk. Liam exhaled like he had been holding his breath for an hour. I opened the envelope and found a slender wafer with a tiny notch. Where is the local kiosk? I scanned the map on the receipt. The broker had circled a neighborhood office that never took appointments. The window on our clock kept shrinking in my head. We go now. I closed my hand around the wafer and the tag. Liam nodded once, then twice. A bus roared past and shook the curb. As we started across, his pass vibrated and flashed reconcile layer order immediately. He flinched like it bit him. I tightened my grip on his wrist and didn't slow. At the corner, a street unit stood open for maintenance. Its display showed rebooting and counted down. We could push the update right there before it hardened. Risk it here or walk 5 blocks? I watched his face while the numbers fell. He looked at my hand, then at the wafer. The timer hit 3 and waited like a held breath. I shoved the wafer into the maintenance slot before the timer hit 2. The kiosk hiccuped and suspended the reboot. Liam pressed his wrist to the pad and held, waiting for a bite. Now the tag. I lifted his token and touched the aux reader. The screen flashed unauthorized hardware and then switched to local-only mode. The countdown froze at 1 like a held breath. Choose patch or bypass? A service menu unfolded with 2 ugly buttons. Patch promised stability while bypass promised speed. I went for bypass because our clock kept shrinking. The kiosk blinked and opened a raw interface. It listed his pieces like folders on a messy drive. I selected portrait shard and pressed bind to physical. The system demanded witness proximity within 1 meter. I stepped tight until our elbows met. My phone vibrated and asked for voice beats. I hummed the oath code low and steady. The kiosk synced to me and began writing. A maintenance worker rounded the corner with a toolbox. He spotted us and raised an eyebrow. That unit is locked for service, he warned, half curious, half bored. 2 minutes. I kept my body between him and the screen. He shrugged but hovered near the power switch. Liam stared at the worker's thumb like it might cut us off. The right stalled at 61% with a harsh tone. A new prompt demanded checksum origin once more. I lifted the token and pressed harder. The reader scraped and finally chimed. 95% crept on the progress bar. The kiosk requested a fallback portrait if the merge failed. I opened the photo booth session and pushed the export code. The worker's hand hovered over the breaker like a threat. 1 more cycle, he muttered, foot tapping. The bar stuck at 99 and refused to flip. Liam's jaw worked like he was chewing ice. I yanked the wafer out and shoved it back and rotated. The kiosk threw a warning about orientation and then accepted it anyway. The bar hit complete and the portrait box filled with a rough face. "Test it," I said, forcing air out. Liam held still while the kiosk performed liveness sampling. It flagged minor jitter and requested witness reinforcement. I set my palm on his shoulder and looked straight into the lens. Green tick, then a second one. The kiosk printed a tiny receipt with a temporary ID hash. The maintenance worker sniffed and tucked his hand away from the breaker. "Done here." I pocketed the slip before it cooled. He gestured at the unit like take your miracle elsewhere. We stepped back into the stream of people and didn't slow. His pass vibrated and displayed merge pending at issuer only. The street unit had bought us time but not the finish. "Neighborhood office," I said, pointing at the map. We cut through a side alley and reached the corner office fast. A self-check-in terminal blinked awake and fed us a number. The room hummed with low machines and impatient bodies. Our number flashed sooner than it should have. A compact clerk waved us behind a Plex booth with a private scanner. "Local registration runs on an old stack," she muttered, eyes sharp. She slid a tray toward me for personal items. I placed the wafer and token down. Her eyebrow twitched. She recognized the wafer's notch. "Bridge key," she whispered with the smallest smirk. She fed the wafer into a hidden slot and locked it. "One attempt only," she warned, glancing at the hallway camera. I pressed my foot against the base of our chairs to stay grounded. "Partner on the sensor pad," she pointed without looking at me. I pressed my palm and recited the oath in a slower cadence. The display liked the timing and showed bond signal strong. "Now you," she tipped her chin at Liam. He leaned into the capture frame and didn't blink. The machine assembled a mesh from his face and hands, then paused on the fingertips. "Why fingertips?" My mouth dried. "Legacy registrar still believes in ink," she answered, already pulling a strip. "They trust smudge more than math." She rolled a small pad across his fingers and pressed them to the card. The mark appeared shallow but visible. The reader analyzed it for spacing and ridges. It posted marginal but acceptable. She fed the card into a narrow slot. The machine drew it inside and sampled chemicals. A light flickered like a warning flare, then calmed. "We keep that," she added, tone factual. "Origin field now," the clerk murmured, eyes never leaving the graph. A new pane opened with a blank line demanding anchor source. She hovered above it with a stylus waiting for truth. I slid the token across the desk. She didn't touch it. "We need a birthplace file, not a charm," she said, eyes on me. Liam stared at the desk. Like it might offer an answer. I dug for the torn print with the empty portrait. The clerk took it gingerly and fed it under a microscope camera. "This shows issuer bundle but no cradle record," she observed, voice tight. "What can replace cradle?" The question leapt out of me. She tapped the screen twice and brought up a list. "Witness aggregation at scale," she said, 40 signatures verifying a living history. "We can get 40, I answered before thinking. She held my gaze for a long second. "Within 24 hours or the session decays," she warned with zero softness. She printed a QR that contained the pledge packet. "Each signature requires face capture and a short beat," she explained. "No duplicates or the set collapses." "Start now." I grabbed the printout like a lifeline. Liam stood and steadied himself on the counter. The clerk slid our token and wafer back with a tiny nod. We rated contacts like it was a fire drill. Neighbors first, then coworkers, then the few friends who still answered on the first ring. I held the town office camera toward each face while the app counted beats. "State your name and confirm living memory," the script demanded. They did, some curious, some confused. The counter clicked up remarkably slow. Each approval felt like pulling a nail. On signature 11 someone balked. "What is this?" she asked, eyes wary. "A registry error," I replied, keeping my voice level. She hesitated, then nodded once and signed with quick beats. By 20, the application insisted on diversity of sources. We needed a teacher, a landlord, a health worker, a coach. I scanned the list and started dialing with frantic thumbs. We found the landlord at a hardware run. He scowled at the prompt, then shrugged and completed it. The counter ticked to 21 and held like it might slide back. A coach responded from a school field. He shouted his lines over whistles and laughed at our panic. The app captured his rhythm and stamped him valid. The counter eased forward. The health worker took longer. She demanded an appointment code and refused doorstep anything. We booked a walk-in slot and raced across town. The pass buzzed warnings the entire ride. We hit the clinic and sprinted to intake. 2-minute proof, I told the nurse at the desk. She studied our QR and exhaled impatient air. Then she leaned into the camera and performed the beats like a pro. The counter reached 29. The app demanded witnesses from 5-time brackets. I cursed under my breath and split the list with Liam. We targeted older neighbors and a retired clerk who remembered everyone's faces. In a tiny park, we cornered the retired clerk feeding pigeons from a paper bag. He watched Liam for a long second and frowned. "He rents upstairs," he finally said with a dry nod. The app loved the phrasing and bumped us to 31. My phone battery hit red and flashed conserve mode. I yanked a power pack from the kiosk's accessory shelf and paid by tap without looking. Liam grabbed passerby after passerby with polite urgency. At 36, 2 adolescents offered signatures for cash. I shook my head and moved on. We caught a bus driver on break who recognized Liam from morning commutes. The app counted him valid with a cheerful tone. At 39, everything slowed. The app asked for one signature from an authority figure, not the clerk, not the broker, not the officers who already touched our case. It wanted new, it wanted weight. I scanned the street and spotted a city inspector marking a notice on a storefront. She saw our rush and raised a palm. "You have 2 minutes," she warned without stopping her task. I delivered the script fast. She stared at Liam from 10 feet and squinted. "I've seen him twice this month near the river path," she stated clearly. The app accepted her as official and rolled us to 40. The packet finalized and produced a heavy QR. It flashed with a short expiration. We ran back toward the neighborhood office like a rope was pulling us. Inside, the compact clerk lifted her head. I slapped the QR to the glass and held it flat. She scanned it and watched the server chew. The machine approved the packet and opened the Cradle substitute window. "Now we graft the set to his file," she murmured, fingers moving quick. Liam stood so still the sensor lost him for a second. "Stay in frame," she directed without looking up. He shuffled an inch and steadied. The machine wrote the bond slowly like stitching through stubborn material. A warning flashed near the end. Conflict between blended signature and issuer policy. The clerk's mouth tightened to a single line. "Do you accept conversion to resident credential?" she asked, finally meeting my eyes. "What does that change?" The words scratched my throat. "He becomes legal under a different category," she answered. "He keeps daily rights, loses federal mobility until full audit." I looked at him, he looked at me. The clerk's finger hovered over 2 options, ICH. O's convert and felt something lift and something drop. The machine roared through the conversion. It stripped one layer and reinforced another. The portrait box filled with detail that held under a tilt test. A new credential slug printed and slid toward us. The clerk placed it on the counter and tapped twice. "Test at the lobby gate," she said. "If it holds, you return tomorrow for the permanent issue." We walked to the lobby like people crossing thin ice. The gate read our passes with one smooth tone. Liam stepped through and didn't flicker. I pressed my abdomen against the railing and waited for a catch. Nothing triggered. The guard yawned and looked at a screen with mild interest. Outside, my phone buzzed with a message from the broker. "Bring the new slug to finalize mortgage review." I stared at the text until it blurred. Then I turned the screen and showed him. He traced the edge of the slug with his thumb. "Let's finish it," he murmured, voice low and raw. I squeezed his hand and checked the time on our window. We took 3 steps toward the street, then froze. His pass flashed a tiny update icon and requested a silent patch. The choice glowed as postpone or apply. I felt our luck waver like a weak radio signal. "Do we trust it?" My chest hammered. He looked at the slug, then at me, then back. I hovered over postpone and waited for his nod. "Postpone," he said with a sharp exhale. I tapped the button and the icon dimmed. Our window stayed intact for now. I thumbed postpone and pocketed his card. A patrol drone drifted lower than comfort. Liam angled his body away from its lens and matched my pace. The drone stalled above us like a stubborn cloud. Finish the loan first. I pointed toward the bank and kept moving. His pulse jumped under my fingers, but he stayed with me. The drone shadow crept along the sidewalk and wouldn't quit. Inside the lobby, a queue split in two. I chose the line with a live clerk and flashed the provisional card. Liam kept his gaze level and relaxed his shoulders. The clerk's smile faltered at the screen. Secondary verification needs a pulse test. She pushed a small disc toward us. Liam pressed his wrist and waited. The disc posted weak signal and asked for nearby support. I set my palm over his and counted slow beats. The disc warmed and logged a stable curve. The clerk glanced at the monitor and nodded once. Sit for a minute, she said, eyes flicking to the ceiling. We took 2 seats by a glass wall. The drone hovered just beyond it like a patient fly. Liam rubbed the edge of the new card and didn't look up. My phone buzzed with a compliance alert. Random audit on this branch. The message flashed across the top banner. Time estimate 5 minutes. Prepare to present origin file. My stomach lurched hard. We move now? I pulled him toward a side corridor and a sign that read customer devices. A row of self-terminals blinked waiting screens. I chose one and inserted our case number. The terminal pulled the mortgage package and loaded a checklist. Only 2 boxes remained: live identity seal, debt history fetch. The second box glowed red like a dare. Your file still points to a dead source. I tightened my grip on the mouse. We can point it to the witness set for now, he whispered, voice dry. I opened the routing panel and searched for an alias. The witness bundle popped up under community attestations. I redirected the link and held my breath. The red box cooled to orange but stayed open. Needs a photo with today's metadata, the terminal suggested. I started the camera and framed us both. The shutter clicked and overlaid a grid. The system asked for partner proximity within 1 step. I drew him close until our shoulders touched. The grid went green and stamped the image. The box shifted to yellow and began uploading. The drone buzz deepened just beyond the glass. Doors swung as the audit team swept in. 2 techs and a lead in a dark jacket. They walked the counters with rehearsed calm. The drone slid inside and settled near their shoulders. Remain seated, the lead announced without raising his voice. He held a scanner that sniffed for layered identities. It pinged once in our direction and then again. His eyebrows tilted together. I stepped into his path before he could reach us. We are mid-mortgage verification, I said, lifting the terminal receipt. He read it in one blink and shifted his aim to Liam's chest. Hold still for lattice sampling. He drew a thin wand across Liam's sternum and waited. The return dribbled in slow dots. You recently bypassed an update, he observed with irritating calm. Pending until registry appointment, I answered and didn't move. He twitched the wand and watched the screen. I can force the patch right now, he offered, tone neutral. No, my answer came before the thought finished. He considered my face for a beat. Then you present a stabilizer, he said, eyes on me. I lifted the bridge wafer and the tiny notch winked, his jaw tig. H10 like he recognized the contraband. That device is not for public use, he warned, voice even. It kept him continuous, I answered with steady breath. He checked the timestamp and tapped a note. You sign a liability slot if it fails, he said, already pulling a form. Where? I took the stylus and skimmed the lines. 3 fields, 1 oath phrase. I keyed in a short sentence and pressed submit. The wand chirped acceptance. He switched modes and ran a delta sweep. The drone mirrored him and recorded every twitch. The returns showed drift but not collapse. He frowned and changed tools. Final check needs a cold plate. He placed a flat tile on the desk. Palm down 3 seconds, no movement. Liam placed his hand and stared at me. 3 seconds stretched into a small eternity. The tile flashed a narrow band of color, then steadied. The lead waited another second, then lifted it. Provisional holds. He gave the faintest shrug. Schedule permanence within the window or you risk attrition. He turned to the clerk and signed her console. The drone rose and angled for the doors. I exhaled and turned back to the terminal. The second box slid from yellow to green with a soft chime. The mortgage package compiled and requested final consent. My finger hovered above accept. The lead paused at the exit and looked back. "One more thing," he called, tone almost bored. "An external actor pinged your case twice this hour." He left before I could ask who. I clicked accept and watched the progress bar crawl. Liam fished the tag from his pocket and rolled it between two fingers. "External actor," he muttered, eyes scanning the room. The bar froze at 96% and refused to nudge. A pop-up appeared demanding client interview by video. The timer gave us 90 seconds to join or lose the session. "Answer it here," I said, throat tight. The video opened to a woman with a badge and a tired stare. "State your relationship," she began, voice clipped. "Spouse and witness under bond." I kept it crisp. "Present your phrase," she instructed, eyes flicking off-screen. I delivered the beats without stumbling. Her screen stayed stone still. "Does he possess any redundant copies?" she asked next. Liam's shoulders jutted forward an inch. I shook my head once and met her eyes. "No extra prints," I answered, each word heavy. "Are you aware of risks under conversion?" she continued. "Daily rights remain, mobility restrictions until full audit." I matched her cadence before she could finish. She exhaled in a way that sounded like impatience. "Last item," she said, leaning toward her camera. "Press silver button on his card to enable tamper log." Liam looked at me, then pressed. A tiny light started a slow pulse. "Good," she concluded and signed off without goodbye. The bar resumed and rolled past full. A digital certificate landed in our download tray with a low chime. My chest finally loosened. A message from the broker popped up 11 seconds later. "Underwriting approved pending card reread today. Bring your partner and the new file." I felt adrenaline slam back to full. We left the bank moving fast. On the steps, Liam's card blinked a small wrench icon. "Apply delayed maintenance now." He froze like the words carried teeth. "Not here." I pulled him toward the curb. Across the street, a pop-up registry van unfolded like a bad idea. A line already formed beneath its awning. A tech waved us over with manufactured warmth. "Free optimization," she called with a marketing smile. "Shorter scan times, fewer prompts." Liam's feet slowed an inch before he forced them forward. I tightened my hand on his wrist. "We have an official slot," I answered and kept walking. The tech lifted a handheld and aimed at his pocket. Her expression changed when the screen flashed our case flag. "Authorized client," she chirped brightly. "We can push the same update the office would." A tiny cursor blinked on her device like a lure. "Show me the checksum chain," I demanded, stepping closer. She flipped her screen with cheerful obedience. The chain contained a third-party hop that didn't belong. "No," I said and let her see my face. Her smile thinned as she lowered the reader. "Then you should apply it at home before midnight," she offered, unconvincing. We turned the corner and cut through a narrow passage. My phone buzzed again, this time from the Civic Center. "Return window moved to 20 hours. Construction shut down. Expect delays." My vision tunneled for a second. "We do it now," I said, steering toward the side entrance of the registry annex. The door scanner recognized our case and allowed a walk-in slot. We slipped into a small room with 2 chairs and a single tower. A technician in plain clothes wheeled toward us with a neutral face. "Card in the cradle," he instructed without small talk. Liam slid the card home and watched the screen. "Silent patch deferred twice," the tech noted, tapping keys. "I apply with rollback enabled unless you override." He looked at me with a professional emptiness. "Rollback on," I confirmed. He ran a pre-check and frowned. "You have debris from a street terminal in the stack," he observed, glancing at Liam. My jaw locked for half a beat. "Can you clean without stripping the build?" I asked. He considered the graph and nodded. "Risk of a short flicker," he warned. "Witness stays within reach." I placed my arm across Liam's shoulders and planted my feet. The tech initiated the patch and started a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. His body trembled once like a caught signal. The screen flooded with lines of tiny numbers. The tech watched a row labeled bone map stabilization and another labeled document layers. The first climbed, the second thinned. The room lights dimmed for a heartbeat. The tower chirped and displayed patch applied with partial rollback. Liam blinked fast and swallowed hard. The tech lifted one finger for silence. Check liveness, he said after a beat. He pointed a camera at Liam and captured 5 micro movements. The screen ticked through blink, swallow, micro tremor, breath, pulse. All right, the tech concluded with careful relief. You gained coherence and lost noise. He printed a short tape and handed it to me. Use this at exits until the database refreshes. We stood to leave and alarms chattered in the distance. The tech checked his console and swore under his breath. Someone just queried your profile with a scraper, he muttered, eyes dark. From where? I pressed, already moving. A real estate portal, he answered, confused. The call wrapped in a marketing server. My blood ran cold and hot at once. We hustled into the hall and merged with a slow crowd. Liam's card pulsed a calmer light now. The tape in my hand smelled like solvent. I shoved it into my pocket and quickened our steps. At the exit, a guard flagged us with a firm chin lift. Random outscan, he announced in a dry voice. He held a handheld that liked to be a problem. He aimed it and waited. The device hummed and digested. Then he touched the tape to the top edge. Temporary alignment recognized, the display posted with a clean tone. We stepped into evening air that felt sharper than before. My phone pinged with a calendar reminder for tomorrow's permanence slot. I tapped confirm without pausing. Home or broker? Liam asked, voice barely above a whisper. Broker first, I answered, already turning. Then we sit by the door until morning. We reached the broker's office in 10 long minutes. She opened the door before I knocked and hustled us inside. Upload now, she directed, pulling up our record. I placed the fresh certificate and the tape code into her tray. Her eyes flicked left and right as the numbers chased each other. Approval finalized, she breathed just once. Funding triggers at dawn, she added, tapping her tablet. Nothing breaks that unless his identity collapses in the next 12 hours. The room seemed to tilt. Then we guard the next 12, I said, voice iron. She handed me a small pouch with a spare card cradle. Offline mode only, she instructed. If a prompt asks to connect, decline. We left and headed home on foot with deliberate speed. Twice, marketing vans tried to flag us with cheerful offers. Twice, I kept my gaze forward and my pace steady. At our building door, the access panel scanned his card. It flashed a question about convenience mode for residents. I hit no and felt the lock click open. Inside the apartment, I pulled the shades and set the cradle on the table. Liam placed the card in and stared like it might run away. I powered the cradle and looked at the tiny screen. Sleep here, I told him, tapping the table edge. If the patch pings again, I wake you. He nodded and leaned back like a person finally allowed to rest. I printed our mortgage approval and placed it beside the cradle. The page warm from the printer made me want to cry. I swallowed and locked the door twice. Near midnight, the card light brightened to a steady glow. A new prompt crawled across the cradle asking to sync music app contacts. I laughed once and hit decline with a hard jab. Another pop-up tried to offer a social login. Denied. A third wanted to consolidate 2 profiles. Denied. The system sulked and returned to a quiet pulse. At 3, the building power flickered. The cradle battery kicked in and kept the card alive. I held my breath for 10 long seconds. The light steadied and the pulse resumed. At 5:40, a soft chime rolled out of the cradle. Scheduled maintenance complete with no drift. My knees buckled and I sat on the floor. Liam stirred and reached for my hand. We made it, he whispered, voice rough but real. I squeezed back and let out a breath I had carried all night. The morning appointment waited and the final lock on our life did too. I woke him with a shake and lifted the cradle plug. The card's pulse held steady like a heartbeat you can trust. We dressed in silence and left before th. E-building stirred. The appointment clock ticked in my head like a metronome. At the annex door, a guard scanned our passes. My screen flashed priority slot confirmed. His flashed pending permanence. The guard waved us through with a bored flick that still felt like a verdict. Inside, a registrar in plain clothes gestured us to a booth. Card in, witness on plate. Her tone stayed neutral but efficient. I pressed my palm down and felt the pad warm fast. Pre-flight check. She ran a local routine that ignored the network. The panel mapped his pattern and posted drift minimal. She nodded once and pulled up a consent screen. 2 paths. Her nail tapped either option. Public audit with full transparency or sealed audit with bond. She looked at me first, then him. Bonded, I answered without breathing. Liam met my eyes and didn't flinch. The registrar captured our choice and opened a new screen marked irreversible. Last blocker, she pointed to a field labeled origin alias. Your packet filled cradle with witness aggregation. Authority wants an alias that cannot vanish. The field blinked, waiting for a word. I typed the address of our new place. The system asked if we intend to live there. Yes, I said, voice clean. The box locked and stamped pending verification. The registrar reached for a silver drawer and pulled out a thin plate. Live etch, she explained, leaves a tiny aberration only biology does. She angled it toward Liam's hand. He placed his palm on the plate and held still. A faint hiss ticked under his skin like a distant kettle. The screen graphed micro-imperfections and drew a unique scar line. Again with your wrist. She rotated the plate and watched the graph. The second line aligned with the first and stabilized. Good, she murmured, already moving to the next step. A pop-up barged onto her monitor from an external cue. It offered a faster permanence if we joined the cloud anchor. She snorted once and closed it with a hard tap. My stomach cooled. Switch to dark mode, she muttered, toggling isolation. Her station cut wireless and went to cable. People try to ride these sessions, she added without drama. The plate spat out a microfilm slip. She slid it into a reader and watched a dot march. This slip becomes the bruise under his identity, she said. No copy matches it. Witness phrase now, she added, eyes on me. I gave our beats with a steady rhythm. The screen accepted and cast a shadow block labeled bond carrier. Permanent seal in 3. She counted down with a pen tap. 3, 2, 1. Her finger fell and a hard tone rang like metal. The lights flickered once. A red triangle popped on the corner of her screen. External call latched onto his card, flashed across the panel. She cursed under her breath and yanked the cable. Hold him, she ordered without looking at me. I grabbed his shoulders and planted my feet. The card light brightened, then dimmed, then steadied like a swimmer resurfacing. Identity reroute from a real estate portal, she read, baffled and angry. They are trying to pull his portrait into marketing. Liam's jaw locked and his hands curled. Block it, I said through my teeth. She slotted a choke key and slammed execute. The triangle softened to amber and faded. The room breathed again. Back to seal, she rearmed the routine and restarted the timer. Witness within touch, she warned. I pressed closer until our elbows bumped solidly. The seal rode across the layers like stitching. Segment 1 turned green. Segment 2 fought and jitters crawled. Segment 3 sat gray and dared us. Push him real, I whispered and pressed my forehead to his temple. He made a tiny sound and didn't move. The gray bar tipped into color and kept going. The panel asked for one last test. Printed archive for legal counterparty, the registrar read aloud. She met my eyes with a warning that remembered Chapter 1 without naming it. We print a safe slice, not you. I nodded and pulled the mortgage approval from my bag. Print this as the archive page, I said. Leave him off the image. She scanned it, masked identifiers, and fed the tray. The printer worked with a solid rhythm. No screams, no gray boxes rising like ghosts. A neat sheet emerged with our case seals and nothing dangerous. Upload that to the mortgage log, she told me. Let them link to the seal we hold here. I sent it and watched the circle complete with a clean tick. Her monitor brightened. Permanent anchor ready, it announced in soft text. She pressed confirm and the card chimed low and confident. A new symbol appeared on its face like a faint star. Test outside, she said, sliding the card back. Then return for the federal handshake. She wiped her hands like someone done with a delicate surgery that worked. We headed for the exit and hit the hallway readers. The first scanner greeted us like it recognized an old friend. The second pinged once, then displayed a challenge. State anchor alias, the mock. Ini wanted the word I had typed. I spoke the address with my mouth close to his ear. He repeated it clear and emphatic. The scanner lit and granted pass-through. I laughed once, too loud, and clamped down. At the doors, a courier leaned against the wall and looked up slowly. He held a branded folder and wore an easy smile. "Delivery for your case," he announced, aiming it at me. His phone flashed the real estate portal's logo like a flag. "Decline," I said, hand raised. He shifted posture and tried again. "It includes a moving bonus," he added in a practiced, helpful tone. "Leave," I answered, stepping into his space. He backed up and tried charm with Liam. "I can enhance your profile picture," he offered, voice bright. Liam's hand moved faster than I expected. He took the folder, ripped the chip out, and dropped it into the building's mail slot. The courier's smile cracked like thin ice, then vanished. We pushed into street air and didn't stop. My phone pinged, funding initiated pending recording. The broker added thumbs up and a time, dawn like she promised. "Federal handshake," I reminded him, already angling back. He nodded once. The card pulsed twice in a new confident rhythm. I let that rhythm set our pace. Back inside, a federal terminal waited behind glass. A serious clerk waved us forward and muted his mic. "3 questions, 1 consent, no drama," he said with dry precision. "Do you accept lifelong audit until conclusion?" His eyes never left the screen. "Yes," I answered without stalling. "Do you accept recourse if layers reappear?" "Yes," I added, bracing. "Do you accept local jurisdiction until release?" "Yes," I said, throat stinging. He raised one finger. "Consent to irreversible record," he intoned. "Permanent," I replied and let it land. He keyed the consents and scanned Liam with a wand that felt official in a quiet way. The return drew clean lines with no stray sparks. He nodded like a surgeon seeing a strong pulse. "Handshake complete," he said and slid a stamped slip across. "If anyone offers you optimization today, refuse." He held my gaze long enough to burn that line in. We left the glass box and found a bench near the exit. I rested my head on my forearm for a count of 10, then I opened the Cradle app and checked the tamper log. A fresh entry sat at the top. Source attempt, restore me, origin, unknown, payload, portrait replacement with ad signature. I felt heat shoot up my spine and die in my teeth. "Kill it," Liam whispered, eyes on the door. I held the entry and chose quarantine, then erase. The log posted action completed with a thin, satisfied tone. The mortgage portal pinged with a final checklist. Upload federal receipt. Confirm anchor alias. Take occupancy photo. I fed it everything while Liam stood in the scanner's good light. The system approved the file and delivered a closing set. I printed them and stacked them by the cradle. Ink dried fast and kept its shape. No tricks, no gray blocks buzzing under the surface. "Last test at our door," I said, rising. We walked back to the building like people who earned each step. The panel saw his card and flashed welcome home with a new icon. We stepped inside and stopped by the table. I set the old torn page next to the new stack. It looked smaller than it did on that first day. It looked scared. "Keep or shred?" I asked, holding it between 2 fingers. Liam stared at it like you look at a heavy stone, then he nodded once. Firm, final. I fed the strip through the small shredder on the floor. The teeth grabbed, chewed, and spat out safe ribbons. The room felt quiet in a way that wasn't empty. His card pulsed a steady beat on the cradle. My phone showed funding complete and a key pickup time. He exhaled and leaned his forehead to mine. "Real enough," he whispered, almost smiling. I closed my eyes for a breath and let the sound settle. The last ribbon curled at our feet like a line we wouldn't cross.